Hello.
Hello, Kevin. This is Alexandra from Galactic Connection. How are you?
Hi, Alexandra.
I got your message, and I know that you have so much information today. And for the benefit of my audience, today is April 13th, 2015. And for those of you that are relatively new to Kevin Annett and his whole cause on the planet, he is an ordained clergyman of the United Church of Canada back in 1990. He was fired unexpectedly, and because of this, he ended up publicly exposing the death of a lot of Aboriginal children. This led him to such a crusade to really start uncovering all of the genocide that is going on and that is affiliated with the churches, in particular the Vatican. But of course that's spread far and wide through other avenues. And he is a community minister. He's a human rights consultant. He's also the field secretary for the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State. If you'd like to access his website, please feel free to do so at this time. It's at itccs.org. And he is a writer, an excellent writer, and he's going to be talking to us today about his new book that he's just released called Samuel Wedge, Memoir of Necropolis, which is just incredible. I've just gotten started on it myself. So with that said, if you'd like to read more about his resume and background, you can, of course, always access it on the tab for his biography at itccs.org. So good afternoon, Kevin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Alexandra.
Good, good. I'm glad to talk to you. It's been a while. I know you've been really, really busy, and there's been a lot of changes. People are wondering what's going on with you.
Well, a lot of my focus has, of course, been on the common law courts that we've been setting up, and especially in Canada in conjunction with the Republic of Canada, which has really taken off. We now have over 1,200 people across the country working on this, either passively or more actively, as members or actual organizers. One of the things, I can give you an example of what people are doing, is actually entering into buildings of crown corporations and churches that have been convicted of these crimes of genocide against Native people, and they're reclaiming these buildings. That's been happening more and more. It's very interesting what's going on, because what I'm seeing these days on the ground and also through all sorts of communications I've been getting is that people they're losing their fear. They're going ahead and saying, look, these police agencies, these government, corporate church agencies, they're murderous. We don't have to pay for them anymore. We don't have to live alongside them. And, I've been getting calls, for you to use one example, in Alberta, which is a rural part of Canada, a lot of farmers out there. I got a call from a group of farmers who said, we want to join the Republic. We're sick of these crown courts that keep, robbing us of our land. We got to do something. So they held a town meeting. There was like over 50 people there in a town of about 200,
wow,
which was quite amazing. And they're all gung-ho. So it shows you that kind of grassroots movement all over the place that we're seeing. We're really turning a corner now, and it's almost as if people are realizing, well, we're a new spiritual nation here. We're not part of this old murderous system anymore.
That's interesting, because I just got done doing an interview with Simon Parks, and he is a United Kingdom city councillor. And one of the comments he made, and he's been really stressing it in all of the information he puts out there, is that all eyes are on the United States of America. All eyes are on us to see where we're going to take this, because we really are rewriting history. And so I can see this is just another offshoot of that wave of energy that's crossing the planet. And with all the help of all the people around the world, it's just strengthening the United States to take action more effectively, more committedly. So.
Yeah, exactly right. And here's an example of what you're talking about, and he's talking about. In a little while, I'm going out to the Midwest, and there's a big case brewing there. There was a group of farmers in North Dakota who took on this ConAgra Corporation, big agribusiness. And basically, this one farmer who was in his 70s, his name is Gene, he lived near Aberdeen, South Dakota. He refused to sell his organic crop business to ConAgra. So basically they had him put in jail. They got their sheriffs on their payroll to arrest him on trumped-up charges. They had a 6-man jury picked by the prosecutor, run through the kind of ramrod this case against him, that he had defrauded the government. I mean, it was a totally cooked-up case. They put him in solitary. He had a stroke and was in a wheelchair. He was 77 years old. Then we had him in jail for over 6 months in solitary, if you can believe it, trying to break him because he was a symbol of these farmers that were resisting ConAgra. Well, he's out now, and he's even more angry and determined, and they're wanting me to come up there and start holding some meetings showing how the common law courts can start deputizing the sheriffs and saying, we want to arrest these ConAgra corporate heads and the judges who work with them. People might have noticed in the news this last week, there was a judge in America who was just given 28 years in prison because he was falsely imprisoning young kids and getting kickbacks from these private jails, these private corporations that run the jails. He's just putting people away and making millions of dollars to do it. So the tide is beginning to shift if the system itself is beginning to imprison its own judges. And, we're seeing this all over the place.
Wow, that really needs to be addressed super, super assertively, because that gets back to Monsanto and all the GMOs, which are, poisoning the entire planet. It's not just one country, one town, one city. So that's fantastic. Now, you had also mentioned, I noticed that you've launched your own radio show called Public Free Canada. How is that going at this point?
It's going wonderfully. Radio Free Canada, it's every Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's bbsradio.com/Radio Free Canada. We've had 6 shows so far. We've had some great responses. We actually, there was a famous case of this man, Dean Clifford, who was put in jail in Canada for basically giving workshops on the common law. We finally got him out of jail, and he's a powerhouse. He's just been uniting people all over central Canada in this work. So the radio shows have been a real good platform, and urge people to kind of spread the word about that, because this medium is a very effective way of uniting people.
It really is. Now, go back over the Dean Clifford scenario. Apparently he was in prison for 16 months, and what I thought was so cool was that he took the time while he was there to educate all the other prisoners about their own common law rights. I just loved it. I chuckled when I saw that. But exactly what happened in order to get him landed in prison?
Well, the thing about Canada is that, it's not under any kind of rule of law. It rules by fiat. So, for example, the head of state is one guy, Governor General, the Queen's representative, who can remove the government if he wants. It's an oligarchy. It's like a colonial system. So the police never need writs or warrants of any kind. Dean was in Hamilton, Ontario, giving a workshop, and these Ontario Provincial Police walked in, plainclothes cops, no badges, no names, no warrants, and just grabbed him and took him out and imprisoned him on this trumped-up charge that he hadn't registered his guns. He had this gun his father had given him, and it was he had forgotten to renew it, and so they got him in prison on that basis. Then they began to really, they put him in solitary. They tried to provoke him to do something like hit a guard or something, but he wouldn't. He was very principled. He kept going back into court asking for the charges. They kept delaying on different technicalities. They went on that way for almost a year and a half. They even denied him the right to file writs of habeas corpus. That's a writ allowing your case to be brought forward or to have it transferred to another jurisdiction. They wouldn't even allow that. We're talking pre-Magna Carta oligarchy here. They don't even recognize the right of people to have basic due process. So all of that was exposed in the course of him being there, and it actually boomeranged against them.
Good.
As it always does. There's a lot of people who wake up when individuals like that are targeted. So I think they're learning that, they've got to kind of not be so blatant sometimes, and showing people what a stupid system it is.
What did he actually learn when you were interviewing him? What do you feel he learned from going through this imprisonment of such a long period of time?
The way Dean put it to me is he said that he learned patience. He learned that, before that he was this young guy, he's in his 30s, he was kind of had this, I'm going to take on the whole system single-handedly attitude. He's very brave and very knowledgeable. But he also learned that you got to do it with others, and he was learning that from some of the Aboriginal prisoners. In Canada, between a third and in some provinces, half the prisoners in jail are Native, even though they're only 2% of the population.
Wow.
Because the government actually makes money off having Indians in prison. Any money that would have come to their family reverts to the government if they're incarcerated. And so there's a huge industry in making money off Indians by imprisoning them. It's the same kind of system you have in the States with the black population. But and so these guys are really pissed off, and Dean began to work with them about their rights, and they began to teach him about their traditional tribal ways. And it was very rich. And in fact, that's one of the reasons they let him go. They didn't want him in there anymore, kind of waking people up to what they could do. What we're finding everywhere, Alexandra, is that it's like in The Wizard of Oz, there's a little guy behind the big mask, and as soon as we pull back the mask, we see that they don't have any actual power. It's what we give to them. Dean put it really well on the show yesterday with us. He said, when you vote somebody into office, you're giving them carte blanche. You're not electing them. It's a contract, but there's no terms and conditions. You're not saying to a congressman or member of parliament, okay, if you're elected, you've got to do this. We're just saying, go ahead and represent us. So he said, in that system, anything that happens to you is your own fault. If you vote them in, if you pay their taxes, you're responsible for anything that happens to you. You can't go around whining
Very true.
about the system. So he says, stop it altogether. Stop voting for them. Stop electing them. Stop paying their taxes. Let the whole system collapse. Build a new system. That's our whole focus.
Wow. God, I couldn't say that better. And, those are the types of things people are constantly saying, that they don't have the power or the authority to bring down the corrupt system, and they can't. They're constantly asking, well, what can I do? What can just me do? And this is a perfect example. If we united, just even a small percentage of us, we can really hurt them where it counts, which is monetarily.
Well, it's a really fascinating thing. We talked about this in the air, too, why people are afraid. And it's part of the programming, and why there's so much child abuse is it prepares people, pre-programs them to have this habitual obedience to authority, even though when they know the authority is criminal. And they shouldn't be doing it, but they do it anyway. It's habitual behavior because most of us don't think consciously. We think habitually. We think according to patterns that have been drummed into us. So I found there's only two ways to break from that. Either extreme repression, you have to go through all the incredible loss and shock and trauma, and then you wake up. Or you have to be part of a movement that systematically educates people into a different worldview. Mm-hmm. And we need both. I mean, people like myself and Dean have been fortunate in that we had the boot put to us, and so we had to wake up. But, others, we need to link them up. You need, like they said in the 60s, you need a counterculture, a spiritual counterculture that's saying has a different worldview and saying people, you don't have to, opt in anymore. You can opt out into this now.
Well, and I believe we're in the midst of that, Kevin. I mean, there's just no question of mind that there's so much progress going on. In fact, I wanted to bring up to you that one of the pieces of intel that this gentleman, Simon, had shared is that 10 United States senators have been arrested. And this was supposedly due to they getting busted for ordering an assassination attempt on Obama.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
that just went down.
This thing like as people know, hopefully know about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, it affects California, of course. It affects the whole West Coast of America. It's basically the government is handing over authority to corporations. They're saying you're not under our laws anymore. You are your own nations. You can do whatever you want to the environment, to people, and there won't be any U.S. government interference. So in that system, in a corporate oligarchy, people that aren't in a democracy of any kind, it's not accountable, it's corporate-driven and run. All the more reason to break from those systems because it's what you faced in 1776. It's an oligarchy.
That's such a good point. And I really do believe that one of the core ingredients to the disruption and the decay of our society is a lack of accountability. This keeps coming up time and time again in some of the individuals that I speak to. In fact, one of my last interviews that came up as well. And so I wanted to ask you, where is the level of accountability with common law versus the jurisdictional law that we supposedly live under right now?
Well, the whole notion of accountability. You don't need accountability in common law because the people control it.
There you go.
In a system of true sovereignty, accountability is usually a catchword of those in power to make it seem like they're really benevolent and you can trust them. The reality is that when people control their own lives, you don't need accountability because there's a built-in system where if something is wrong, people correct it. It's fine. And so it's the words that we have to be careful about because they've been given to us. Just like the classic case I love is the word arrogant, which actually we're taught that that's a bad thing to be arrogant, right? It's not nice. Canadians especially don't like that. But arrogati in Italy just means in Italian it means to claim for yourself, to claim for oneself.
Wow.
Now that's a good thing, but we're brainwashed to think it's a bad thing because they don't want the rank and file of the population claiming everything for themselves. I mean, that's the words given to us. There's always an underlying meaning that we're not aware of, right? From the narrow-linguistic programming.
And God forbid that we would claim something for ourselves. Instead of being subservient slaves.
Right.
I mean, that's just what. Yeah, no kidding. Well, and I mean accountable from the standpoint that these politicians that we continue to, well, I don't even know if, I'm not even buying the fact that we continue to vote them in. I mean, we have some of the lowest statistical rates out there as far as the number of people voting.
Right.
You know what I mean? So who's really getting these people in office is my question. But even if they do, where is their level of accountability? Where are all of us? It is time for us to wake up and command that they step up or step out.
Right. Well, that's the thing that we were talking about yesterday on Radio Free Canada, that Dean and others were making the point that you don't have to worry anymore about making anyone answerable because you can turn off their system tomorrow. We could all turn it off tomorrow, but the problem is our own thinking and the way we're subservient. And, here's another example. Just this last week, we found out about another fatal police shooting in a little town called Kitchener, Ontario. A young guy, a 20-year-old man standing on his porch, he's peeling apples with a knife. A policeman goes by and shoots him and kills him because he's holding a knife.
Wow.
Okay, so Bill Baker was his name. He was also partly mentally incapacitated. He had a learning disorder and everything. He's killed, and they don't identify who the police is. There's no public investigation. They're keeping it in-house, and everyone in Kitchener is upset. But you know what they're saying? Well, we got to make the police prosecute this guy. Well, I mean, that's the first reaction we have. We got to make the system work. We got to get mommy and daddy to stop hitting us and behave nicer. We don't think in terms of disarm the police, get rid of them, have our own community policing, take back the system. That's how, like, a mature person would think. But an infantile person thinks, well, let's just get them to be nicer to us, right? And so that's what I mean about our thinking. It's got to change.
Well, you have to admit, Kevin, that it's the whole Pavlovsky's dog. They've done an efficient job of anybody who has stepped out to challenge the existing structure. They've either, they've had their hands slapped or they've had their house taken away or, they've been assassinated even, But, I mean, I really do think those days are...
Most of that, like, the fear is prior to it happening. Once you go through that, you realize, okay, so what? Okay, they took away my family, they took away my house, but I'm still here, I'm more educated, I'm more determined. They haven't taken anything from me. But on the other side of that trauma, we're all so afraid of something bad happening to us, and that's the fear culture that they rule by. That's the only way they can rule, by having us all in that state. You
and I've talked about this very in great detail because we both have had our lives threatened because of speaking out and what we do. And the one thing that we both recognized was because we're both fearless people, we're not drawing those types of events into our life. And really, if you are going to seriously consider living a life of a sovereign person, you must go down that pathway of really, as they say, kind of facing your demons, so to speak, where you're really coming to very clear terms what am I willing to die for? You know, what did I come here for? What is my purpose? Have I lived a fulfilling life? Did I fulfill what I wanted to fulfill? And if not, am I willing to go and do what it takes to make it happen? Not in a violent way, meaning. But you remember, you and I got in this very heavy conversation about that. It was like, you know, how far are we willing to go because of how passionate we are, you know? And I think other people, they'll recognize that if they just take that first leap, they're in a way better place than those that even started even 2 years ago, because the light on the planet is so massive now. There's so much more protection now.
And yeah, exactly, and there needs to be that kind of Copernican revolution within ourselves where we don't see ourselves as the center of the universe anymore. We don't have the immediate response of, well, what's going to happen to me if we do this? That's usually how people react when they're coming out of that kind of childish fear mode. Instead, they think, well, not what's going to happen to me. What's going to happen to that little kid? What's going to happen to our world? What's going to happen to the people down the block who are threatened if I don't act?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that, when we start thinking in those terms, we become invincible, and it spreads. And I see that beginning more and more.
That is so accurate. The invincibility feeling, it really can take hold, and it can take hold in such a magnanimous way that it spreads. It's like a contagion. You know, and it's already starting, folks. I mean, this is what's so exciting about the time that we are, the time that we are at hand here. Now, Kevin, talk to us a little bit about this citizen arrest of Bergoglio in New York City. Now, you claim that went down late September in Washington. I think most people are going to come back with, yeah, but where's the proof? Where's the obvious, presentation and documentation to show that this has made any kind of difference? How would you respond to that?
Well, he's coming in third week in September around the 24th. He's been invited by both houses, both parties in Congress to address them, first time in history.
Okay.
And he's also speaking at the UN to the General Assembly, so it's a big do, okay? There's a standing arrest warrant out for him, and it isn't just from us. There's lawyers in Washington, D.C. that are going to seek to detain him for two reasons. He's head of a criminal syndicate they call the Roman Catholic Church, or the Church of Rome, whose stated policy is to protect child rapists within their ranks and to cover it up and not tell the police. That's a criminal conspiracy, a global criminal conspiracy, actually. Second thing he's charged with by them, by lawyers, Jonathan Levy and other lawyers in Washington, is he is played a direct role in the trafficking of children during the Argentine Dirty War. We know that from eyewitnesses, priests, civil servants who were in on meetings where they planned how to grab the children of political prisoners, how to traffic them for money. That's a big operation in the Catholic Church. They did the same thing in Spain under Franco with thousands of children. And so on those two grounds, he can be and should be arrested, and the police need to assist in his arrest. Otherwise, they're colluding with the criminal body. Now, that's what people are going to be doing. They're going to attempt to detain him. And if once that word gets out, and if it looks like enough people are going to do that, he may not even show up in the U.S., and that's what our hope is. You see, instead of people creating reasons why something can't happen, they need to stand in the light and say, we're going to make sure it doesn't happen. We're going to make sure he doesn't enter the United States. Because he's going to know he'll be detained and banished. And we're using the same thing in Canada with who we call the Dirty 30, the 30 convicted criminals of church and state who are facing arrest warrants, including the heads of the churches and government. The same thing with them. They do not have a right to be, unless they're threats to children and our public safety, they need to be banished from our communities. So it's as simple as that. And the more people get on board with it, the more likely it is we'll stop Pope Francis, Jorge Bergoglio from even coming into America.
Now, a couple of questions, because I'm just thinking in terms of what other people would be questioning. So first of all, one of the things that's gone around is that Jorge Bergoglio is kind of like what they would call a double agent. He is trying to bring in the light, and at the same time, he's still kind of holding the sacred order of the Vatican and doing what, those types of people do. I'm not going to say what it came to my mind. I'm trying to be nice. Anyway, so so one of the questions would be is, how would you respond to that?
Well, Jesuits have been doing that for 400 years. He's the first Jesuit pope. They specialize in subterfuge and dissimulation. What evidence is there he's trying to bring in the light because of what he says? Well, it's interesting because when he makes statements like, homosexuality is not an issue, he's trying to look very liberal, right? The Vatican Cardinal, on 2 occasions, the Curia, the College of Cardinals, have disowned his statements, saying that they don't represent the Vatican. Well, if he actually was the Pope, how could his statements not reflect Vatican policy? So there's a big disconnect there. I mean, in reality, the man isn't the Pope, and that's what we're recognizing. Joseph Ratzinger is still the Pope in residence. That's why he's hiding out in the Vatican. Bergoglio was the front man to fool everybody. It's classic spin operation. Now, if people, this is wishful thinking on the part of people, and they say, oh, he's a nice guy. The spin doctors have known for thousands of years that the way you keep a population controlled is you tell them what they need to hear. And people need to hear that the system is improving right now. Otherwise, they might have to go up against the system, and that's not as comfortable as thinking that somebody in the system is going to make it all better for us, and then we can go back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where it's coming from with most people, because I found it mind-boggling that even people against the church are suddenly deluded that this smiling grandfatherly figure is nice. Well, Hitler smiled too. Does that make him a nice guy?
Well, obviously not. But I do want to point something out on a kind of a spiritual basis, and that is it was on the 11th of this month that Pope Francis came on the radio, supposedly, presenting the official bull of indiction of the extraordinary Jubilee of Mercy. Do you know anything about that?
Is that something to do with he's nullified? They're going to plan nullified debts and blah blah blah, all this stuff.
Correct.
Kind of that nullification.
I just think that, and it's now get this, it's dated to begin December 8th. Now, on a spiritual level, so much of the messages and the information coming in from those that have a lot of guidance, everybody's hearing that this is the year that there's going to be a radical shift. And I just think it's very interesting that the Vatican is already positioning themselves.
Of course they are.
To look like the da-da-da, we're here to save you. We're here to release your debt.
That's exactly what they need to do. They have to say exactly all the right things right now. You got to expect them to say all these things. I mean, that's how people act when their backs are to the wall. So, I mean, it's just, the old saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
Well, but I'm
so easy to be fooled by Rome.
I'm just saying, wow, look at that's just, in my opinion, it's just very interesting, coincidental. They're setting the stage. They're getting ready. I just think it's very interesting. And, of course, they announced this on the 11th of April. We're not talking...
I understand, too. It's kind of like the old example in Hawaii before the Europeans came. There were these kings, and they had no power. They owned no land. They had no standing army, but they acted like gods, because the more powerless the less power you have, the more you have to act like you do have power. And the Vatican has no authority.
Yeah.
In a spiritual or a secular sense. They have to put on this incredible pretense that they have the authority to nullify debts, to do all this stuff. And people, unfortunately, play along with them by believing all the lies that, that thing like the donation of Constantine, which was supposed to have given the Vatican all this worldly authority, it never existed. It was a document fabricated 600 years after Constantine. But, people got to dig deeper and look at their claims and realize that a lot of it's just smoke and mirrors.
Well, granted, but with that said, can you tell the audience about the year of Jubilee, going back to the Old Testament? You, of all people, would know all about this.
Oh, the Jubilee it comes from the Hebrew word yobal, which means trumpet. Basically, it goes back to the Deuteronomic laws, where every 49 years, 7 times 7, all debts were to be canceled, all land returned to the original owners, all prisoners freed. It was like the idea that, as in nature, everything has to rest and replenish. so does the economy, so does society. So every 49 years, everything was to be made equal again and just. Now, of course, the kings of Israel never enacted that. They'd be crazy, right? What, give away our wealth and let all the prisoners out? But what was interesting was that when Jesus first, according to the New Testament in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus' first public appearance he ever makes, he gets up in his hometown in Nazareth, gets up into the synagogue, and says, "The Jubilee year is here. I'm embodying it. We're going to have the Jubilee now. We're going to bring it in." And they tried to kill him, just like they eventually did kill him after he threw the money changers out of the temple in Jerusalem. But, that's the point, that it's been this idea that that the authorities don't enact, but it really runs right through the heart of a lot of these spiritual traditions. The idea that we need to have justice enacted, not just proclaimed.
Wow. So, especially with your education and background in this area, how do you see this time of year, post-Easter and the resurrection, how do you see that correlating with the events going on right now with the Vatican and common law? We've talked about this in the past. You have a fascinating perspective.
Well, it's over and above all of these kind of official religious or institutional responses, there's this reality that they're trying to milk, of course, but the basic reality is that there is this incredible shift happening on the planet, and it's manifesting in that what we talked about earlier, where people are realizing that they are free spiritual beings. They're not enslaved anymore, and all of society should reflect that in terms of the economy and how they relate, the law and everything. And there is I would say, you might call them a remnant or a minority, who have actually broken free from the system, and that's sending out an incredible spiritual shockwave all over the planet. And so that's kind of in general how I see this period, and especially this time of year, which is traditionally the time of renewal and birth and all of that.
So exciting. Now, have you heard anything about the bank, the Vatican Bank, and monies being moved into the banks within China? Is any other intel on that?
Very little has come out of it recently, and that's because they put a lid on everything, which really confirms that it is going on. We know in Europe, one of the groups we work with, the Dutch People's Tribunal, have found that they claim that all the Catholic churches in Holland and Belgium are basically broke. And they might even go into foreclosure and all that.
Wow.
Which is interesting. Yeah, well, now, of course, don't forget that that's what churches always say when they're facing lawsuits. And in fact, we've found more and more evidence all the time linking these child-killing networks in Belgium and Holland with the Catholic Church. There's top cardinals that have been named. So that could be the way they just hide their assets, which is what you do if you're a corporation. You got to hide the money, and we see that churches do that all the time.
Well, and I would imagine with the work that you're doing, and of course that's spread far and wide across the world, more and more people are finally having the courage to step up. They have a support network now that is a little more fearless and committed and dedicated to assisting them in coming out with this information against, a very massive institution. So because of that, I would imagine that they're having to really get prepared for an onslaught of lawsuits. I mean, have you heard anything about that as far as the number of lawsuits that they're being faced with now versus, say, 10 years ago?
Well, they've had it's like what happened in Canada. You had an initial peak, and then all the information was cut off because they don't want people to know that it's escalating. So the government will move in quickly in these countries and bring in legislation preventing people from suing past a certain time. They bring in statute of limitations, quite illegally and all that. Because the main thing is to protect the assets of these church corporations and the government, who are so linked with them. And so, we can't go by official reports because this stuff is often hidden.
That's so true. Yeah, and then, of course, who puts the reports out in the first place?
Right.
Now, you also had mentioned, I think, in a prior article about these two priests that actually stepped forward during the time of Bergoglio in Argentina. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? I mean, I was very impressed that these two gentlemen actually had the courage to do so.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember their names,
Me too.
I'm almost 60 here, so it's, I I can use that as an excuse for my memory. But there were two. One of them's dead now, actually, conveniently.
Oh.
One died. The other's in a monastery in Germany, kind of under wraps. But what they both did say is that they knew that they were involved in the 1970s during the military dictatorship there. They were involved with some of the movements in the slums of Buenos Aires, and some of the priests were arrested and tortured by the military. Bergoglio knew about it and basically said, that's fine. Those priests are too left-wing. We disavow them. You can do whatever you want to them. These two priests had been tortured, and they knew for a fact that Archbishop Bergoglio had given the green light to the military to do that to them. But there's also a civil servant who gave testimony at the second case of the International Common Law Court in Brussels. And he said he was in on the meetings where Bergoglio, he was a good friend with General Videla.
Wow.
Who was and there's, in fact, we've got a picture, we published it online. It shows Bergoglio and Videla walking arm in arm with a smile on their face. And Videla was a horrible dictator, like Pinochet. He was they killed over 30,000 people of their own citizens during that era. Bergoglio was up to his waist in this stuff, and so if the next time people think he's a nice guy, they should check into his history.
That's terrible. In fact, I just found their names, Yorio and Alex.
Yeah.
By the way,
and I think one of them gone.
Yeah, it says Yorio never fully recovered. Forget this, from the traumatic experiences in prison, and died in 2000 in Uruguay.
Right. Now, it's interesting, when they first came out, there was another news item that the same week they began talking, several of Bergoglio's relatives in Argentina died suddenly in car accidents. There were two separate car accidents.
Whoa!
Yeah, and who knows what that was about, but maybe a little signal to Bergoglio not to talk or something, but who knows? It's
God, it's crazy. Now, let's step back, because you kind of went really quickly over the Dirty 30, which I had to chuckle about that one, the convicted war criminals of Canada. Now, have they all already received some sort of serving notification paperwork? You've already gone through that, correct? With all of
yeah, there was some that come to the court. Only one of them responded. They were convicted. They were served the warrants. And the court order, ordering them to comply with the court decision and all that. And now there's arrest warrants out for them. Now, we have people in training in Canada in 3 different areas where they're receiving common law sheriff training to go in and enforce the warrant. And basically, there's a thing at itccs.org. If people go there, you'll see the list of all 30 of them. And it includes, for example, the papal ambassador to Canada, Pedro Quintana, who he's a papal nuncio, lives in Ottawa. He's top of the list because he is actively covering up child trafficking going on through Cornwall, Ontario, where the Catholic Church has a big operation in trafficking kids over the border into New York, and he's very involved in that. So, these people will be, in his case, the idea is to escort him to the border and say, get out,
Oh, my God. You had talked to me a little bit about Canada. For those of us that don't live in your neck of the woods, can you talk to us a little bit about where you feel the main circles of child sacrifice take place?
Well, starting on the West Coast, Vancouver, Seattle is a big hub of it because they're plugged into the Trans-Pacific human trafficking, organ trafficking, snuff film kind of network. And, I mean, virtually every policeman in Vancouver is on the payroll of these people. The organized crime it's like Miami. They just run, in Las Vegas, they run it. They run the show there. Wow. That's a big cluster in that part of the world. There's areas like I mentioned, Cornwall, Ontario, which is down near kind of New York, upper New York State area, tied in with the mob's activities there. And Montreal is another big area because the Drangheta, the mafia that provides a lot of the children for the human sacrificial networks and that. Drangheta is very big in Montreal and that area too. So frankly, any big city, but there's definitely clusters, and especially you get it in areas where children could go missing easily, like Indian reservations, orphanages, Catholic orphanages, there's a whole operation in the government system, like in America, of identifying vulnerable single mothers and criminalizing them and then taking their kids. I mean, it operates with machine efficiency all over the world.
That is so crazy. Now, you had also mentioned that there's quite a bit of activity against the Pope and the cabal in Europe. What are some of the things you've heard as far as that goes?
Well, especially in places like Italy, where you wouldn't expect this stuff to happen, there's just, for one thing, the alternative media is beginning to report this stuff more, which they didn't for many years. Mm-hmm. You're also seeing things like I mentioned, the Dutch People's Tribunal. There's groups like that forming. There's new groups in Spain that have formed to, I met some of them when I was in Barcelona last year, that these survivors of, when they were kids, they were trafficked by the Catholic Church. We met with some of them, and they're very active in stirring things up. In Belgium, that politician, Laurent Louis, who came forward, he's facing imprisonment for having, helped expose the Prime Minister as a child rapist. But, I mean, you get, it kind of ebbs and flows. There's a big movement in England now to, they're very upset about the, recent revelations about more government ministers going to be involved in these sacrificial rituals. That's come out, more eyewitnesses coming forward. So, I mean, it's pretty constant. But it's, again, hard to find out about this stuff because, even in the alternative press, it's people have a kind of gut reaction to reporting these things. There's that fear thing we talked about earlier.
Yeah, no kidding. I thought it was very interesting. You spoke about a foreman in Belgium who had been taken to a psych hospital. His name is Maxim. Can you talk to us a little bit about what prompted that?
Well, again, he was part of that network. That's been, 2 years ago when I first began, when I met Post Nienhoff, who's the one who was, who saw people like George Soros and others at these child hunting parties. By the way, George Soros is the one who you're going to elect if Hillary Clinton is elected because he's her big financial backer. And a close member of the Dutch royal family who goes regularly to these child hunting rituals in the forests of Belgium. Toast and other people have been documenting this stuff more and more from their own memories, like she lived through this as a child, these satanic cults and the child sacrifices and that happen regularly. But they've been much more vocal about it, and ever since Laurent Louis was arrested, they've been coming down on other people more, so that's part of what that was about.
Wow. Things are really stirring up. I mean, this is good. This is actually really good news. I think we would be remiss if we did not read off the Dirty 30, Kevin. So I have it in front of me. I just don't want to annihilate some of the people's names. So if I mispronounce them, you can correct me, please. Yep. So we have Stephen Harper, which is the Prime Minister of Ottawa. We have Joseph Ratzinger, former Pope of Rome. Elizabeth Windsor, the Queen of England. Pedro Lopez Quintana, which is the Vatican nuncio to Canada. Fred Hiltz of the Anglican Church. Bob Bennett, Anglican Bishop. Nora Sanders, General Secretary of the United Church of Canada. Murray Sinclair, the Chairman of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Winnipeg. That's interesting. John Malloy, Officer of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Gary Patterson, Moderator of the United Church of Canada. John Jessamine, Lawyer of the United Church of Canada. Marion Best, former Moderator. Brian Thorpe, Official of UCC. Bill Howley, Art Anderson, Foster Freed, and Phil Spencer, who are all part of the UCC. John Cashore, I hope I pronounced that correctly, of the former British Columbia Government Minister. Wow, there's a biggie. Peter Montague, Royal Canadian Mounted Police Inspector. Robert Paulson, former Royal Canadian Mounted Policeman Superintendent. Terry White, former UCC clergy. Ron, how do you pronounce this? Huenick?
Yep.
Okay, he's a lawyer out of Vancouver. Daniel Fulton, former CEO of Weyerhaeuser Limited. Sean Atleo, former Chief Assembly of First Nations. Bill Montour, CEO of Six Nations Confederacy. Adolfo Pachon, of course everybody knows that, Superior General Jesuit Order of Rome. Tarcisio Bertoni, Cardinal of Rome. Angelo Sodano, Cardinal of Rome, and Angela Bagnasco, right? Is that
yep.
Cardinal of Genoa. Last but not least is Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury. Wow, Canterbury. Think about that, folks, what that goes back to. Wow.
Yeah, well, those guys, by and large, are all either directly involved or helping in child trafficking or the destruction of evidence of the murder of children at residential schools and that kind of thing.
That's a lot of work. How long has it taken you to get to this place with all these people listed, these 30 people listed?
Well, it's the accumulation of over 15 years' work.
Wow.
But it's not just that. It's also people coming forward after those 15 years to confirm, yes, we have. You see, these people weren't named just lightly. We had a policy that any accusation had to be confirmed independently by 3 witnesses and documentation. So these names the result of a lot of research and other attempts in court to try these people, but of course in Canadian law they're exempt from prosecution if they're connected to the church or the government.
Unbelievable. Once again, Kevin, I commend you with your commitment to, and you know, you said it so well that when people ask you, how do you keep doing this? Because you're walking in such a murky, dark type of world. You know, the stuff that you have exposed in your last visit, the types of things that you have to hear every day, you know, most people just could not keep doing what you do. And I just really honor the fact that, you know, remember you told me that story about the child that keeps you going?
Mm-hmm.
Can you share that again with everybody?
Well, it was the first time I had that was I was in a refugee camp in Chiapas, Mexico, and I asked the same question to one of the defunct priests who was working there with the Mayan Indians because there was a price out on his head, and I asked him, this was in 1987, I said, well, why don't you kind of get out? And he said, well, every time I get frightened, I look at the poorest child in the camp, and I realize that they can't get out. They're always going to be here, so why should I run away from them? And she said, those kids give me the courage to carry on. And that's happened to me many times when when I think of and the contact I have with people, it's our contact with each other that keeps us strong. And our stubbornness, I think, and our just awareness that they have no right to do this. My fear is only going to feed their power.
Yeah.
And so I look at it that way, really.
You know, the other thing that came to my mind was that is the true representation of a guardian, is recognizing that you have the tools, you have the knowledge, you have the fearlessness, the courage, the compassion, the dedication, the commitment. You have that fire in your spirit to, I'm not going to say fight for this cause, but to pursue this cause for all of those that cannot. You know, those that are in wheelchairs, those that are on so many pharmaceutical drugs, they don't even know what day of the week it is. For all of those children that are raped and battered and tortured and killed. You know, for the people that can't speak up, the people that are in prisons. This is what we are doing, those of us that do have the ability to take action. It's very important for us to remember that.
Right, and that it has an effect because just a few months ago, Interpol acted on information we had given them, and they arrested over 1,000 people across Europe who were trafficking children. And in one brilliant move, they actually found 30 children in cages in a basement in Belgium, and they released them. So those 30 children would have died if it hadn't been for our work. So, you know, it has an effect. And I just say to people, come on in, the water's fine. You know, we can all be doing this, right? Yeah.
And I think people are really starting to get that. Now, you also mentioned, going back a little bit, you were talking about the workshops, and you're really getting pretty assertive in setting these up around all over the place and acting under the authority of Canada, the Republic of Canada. Can you talk to everybody a little bit about how you go about issuing these warrants of the High Court of Justice of the Republic?
Okay, well, some of it's explained right on the Canada website, and that's Canada, that's K-A-N-A-T-A, Canada, CanadaRepublic.ca. And on there you see all of the documents the sheriff training manual, all that stuff on that website. But in a nutshell, we basically bring together people who want to receive not just training, but accreditation with badges and everything as common law sheriffs. And we take them through different role-playing scenarios of what it would look like to serve a warrant, to detain somebody, to approach the existing police and deputize them as common law officers, get them on board, or at least standing down so they don't interfere when these arrests and other things are occurring. But over and above arresting individuals, there's the broader question of how you disestablish these institutions and, seize their property and assets, and that's the bigger challenge, of course.
God, that's great. I'm glad to hear that you've added that into that. Now, how long does this training take, Kevin?
Well, right now it's been running 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
And it depends on people's schedule. Often they're working, so we do it on weekends. We kind of adapt it to where people are at. But the bottom line is people have to take it and run with it themselves and not wait for a central leadership. We've got the groups that have done that. They're really blossoming all over. In Ontario, we already have nine branches of the Republic that are working in different communities. So, that's a result of just initiative.
That's great. And I know that you're a very major advocate of no violence, and just doing this, if you do this properly and you do it without trying to do it alone, folks, that's the key, making sure that you are supported in a group of people. This is what we're moving into. We're moving into union, unison, unity, doing everything together, right?
Yeah, and you'd be surprised how a simple act is more important than 10 million words, because it educates you in 5 minutes more than any amount of seminars or workshops can. Just the experience of trying something and learning from mistakes and whatever, and that's how something continues to grow.
Now, I think this is pretty cool, and I think it would motivate a lot of people. You mentioned that despite the fact that you need the sheriffs to obviously do the major arrests, you also need a videographer and someone that's going to organize and interface with the press and the media, and also someone that will provide additional security, right?
Right, and we rely on the people around us for that security. We've had many incidents during the period when we were occupying churches on Sundays to force the disclosure about the genocide of the Native kids. One day, the police were trying to grab me, but they couldn't get through the crowd. There was over 50 angry Indians all around me, and the cops couldn't get at me. And that's the only reason I didn't end up in the Slimer that day, because of that. And so it's very important to do things in numbers and to film it and get it out to the world. I remember when in Liverpool, England, when that crowd went in and into a court and threw the judge off his bench, and because he was bringing in fraudulent court orders, 600 people went into the courtroom and removed him and nullified an illegal tax. That was up on YouTube for a few years until the British government had it taken down, because we were giving too many people the idea that they could act on their own behalf. But it's the power of getting things out there. Once we do it, it's very important as well.
Well, now, is there anything else on the political and movement front? Because if not, I'm going to move on to your book.
No, I think that's good. Like I say, CanadaRepublic.ca is the site to go to, and it'll inspire a lot of Americans, because we got a lot of ideas from the American Republic, not the corporation, but the Republican tradition there. Right,
and don't forget, everyone, Canada is spelled with a K, not a C. So it's Kanata, okay?
That means our village.
Our village.
In the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois language.
So, definitely check that out, because it's very exciting. If you really want to sink your energies into something that's moving and it's not rotten to the core and it's actually serving the public and the world at large, this is really where you want to go, because this is going to represent everybody on the planet. It's not just in Canada. A lot of people have written in and asked about that. The Republic of Canada does not have an actual jurisdiction, right, Kevin?
That's right. It's anyway, because common law has universal jurisdiction, so does this republic, and anyone can be a citizen. Eventually, we're doing away with those borders, but this is the first step.
God, how cool is that going to be? Now, I really want everyone to take a look at Kevin's new book. It's called Samuel Wedge, Memoir of Necropolis, and I just wanted him to give us a little bit of an excerpt as to what it involves, because this truly, I mean, I started reading it and it was like I couldn't put it down. It was so well. Of course, you're such an excellent writer, Kevin. I mean, oh my God. But tell me a little bit about how long have you been working on this?
Well, I read it in about, 3 or 4 months, but I got the idea from my dad, Bill Annett, who lives in Florida, and he said, look, Salman Rushdie wrote this work of fiction called Joseph Anton about when the Ayatollah put the kill order out on him for writing the satanic verses, and it gave him a license, writing about his own story in a fictionalized way. It gave him a license that kind of made the story a lot more interesting. So he said, why don't you do the same thing? I mean, the church and the government have put out a fatwa on you, Kev. They've been trying to knock you out for 20 years. Why don't you write about it? So I did. Samuel Wedge was kind of loosely based on me, although it doesn't. One of the ways I wrote myself there was kind of in a way that was not totally accurate in terms of the Samuel Wedge character. He's older. He's living in Florida. He's kind of given up to some degree. Not given up, but he doesn't seem to have the energy to continue to do a lot of stuff. But he's very wise now, and he's reflecting on stuff and that kind of thing. So I wouldn't say it's a direct representation of me or anything, but I had a lot of fun writing it, and it's gotten quite a response already because, like I say, the power of fiction is that one thing, for example, I can give you an example. I was able to describe in fiction what I couldn't really because I don't have the direct evidence of it, but we had one scene where the church officials are sitting around talking about how to get rid of this guy. And there's a Canadian senator who's present who's talking about, the repercussions of this man and how he's highlighting about these crimes of genocide. We've got to stop the guy. So it allows us to go into those boardrooms, into those behind-the-door situations, and really look into the characters and who are these people? I mean, they're not monsters. They're just people protecting their corporate interests, and you got to get rid of a guy, right? Mm-hmm. It's how that whole kind of mentality works. So there was a really neat writing about all that stuff because for many years I've been constrained by the fact that I'm not operating in a fictional way, but a very real way. Like I base everything I'm doing on hard evidence and truth. But I think for me, I needed to get out of that for a while and just kind of, imagine a bit, right?
I can't agree with you more because, I mean, seriously, there's so many of us that wonder, how can you be doing this day in and day out? Because it truly is the darkest of our society that most of us either don't want to look at, or if we do look at it, we can't do it for long periods of time. So I know there are so many of us that look at you and say, thank God somebody has the stamina to be able to pursue this and follow it all the way to the end. I love this one line. It says, in the councils of church and state and beyond, in the very boardrooms, the editorial offices and the judicial chambers of those who lever today's world, Wedge discovers that there is murderous injustice in the form of tiny crucifixions that routinely occur, never talked about, much less mentioned in our carefully manicured society and our narrowly censored media. Wow.
Right.
I mean, that just sums it up right there.
Well, that's right, and I really appreciated the chance to talk a little bit about my own feelings, which I often don't get. I mean, I get asked that, but you can't really share the real stuff. The things that really hurt us, like when my kids were taken away. And there was just a poignant little scene where Wedge, his daughters are growing up now, they're in their 20s, but they really don't have a lot of contact with him because of the pain and the risk and everything was so great that, there's just been that kind of inevitable estrangement. And he just looks at a picture of his two daughters when they were little, and they were both holding his hand, and he just broke down and started sobbing, which he hadn't done in years, because it's just, he recognized all of a sudden what it had cost him, what he had lost, which he could never recover. And it's that pain that you can't ever really escape from. That, yes, there was a cost involved in this, definitely.
Yeah, I think what's the old saying, the worst thing that could ever happen is for a parent to lose a child. rather than the other way around. The most difficult thing for them. You just can never,
is worse than death because there's so much misunderstanding and things that can't be communicated. I mean, I never told my daughters a lot of things because it would endanger them.
Yeah. And
how do you share this horrible stuff with your own kids anyway? You don't want to.
Right.
And yet at some point they need to know because like everybody needs to know. But there's the old saying in the Bible. I think God said to Jeremiah, "Your greatest enemy will be those of your own house." And that's true. When we do this work, often our own families become our biggest opponents. And, they act like you betrayed them somehow by challenging their worldview and the little arrangement you had. But it's what inevitably happens, and that's part of the pain of doing this work.
Oh, big time. Well, and I challenge the audience once again to remind yourself that we are working within a technological field that is controlled by the cabal, and they are very expertise in the trolling and the manipulation of information to smear someone's character. And even when good people step up and really think that something's been done wrong to them, even in those instances, I'm even seeing that we need to challenge ourselves to question how that information came to us, and
right.
and how we came to that conclusion, because we really truly are swimming in a soup of manipulations and lies by agencies and governments and officials. So unfortunately, because of the technology, that being part of the matrix, we're still using that as a backbone to communicate and share information. So I really wanted to say that. It's kind of something I kind of wanted to remind myself of that because of the blog that we use and run.
Right.
So anyway, well, Kevin, thanks so much again for just keeping up the work.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to hear how more and more people are joining the organization. I would also like to note to all of you out there who feel that you are a guardian that you might want to take a more active role in this, because Kevin does need the help of the guardians, in particular because they are up against moles and people that infiltrate, that are constantly trying to derail him from getting to the end game. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. I thought about that last time I interviewed you, and I forgot to say.
And I should mention, too, you can get Samuel Wedge it's published by Author House in America. You can get it through Amazon.com, itccs.org, and CanadaRepublic.ca. Also, I do have a personal website, kevinannett.com.
Perfect. That's right. You just got that up. So, yeah, that's good. Good news.
Yeah, very good.
Things are moving forward, huh?
They sure are.
Okay, well, listen, you take care. And for all of you listening on this on-the-fly interview, please check out galacticconnection.com. If you have any questions, you can always contact us. There's emails all over the place. We do have a daily blog that runs 365 days a year for inspiration, encouragement, and education. And, of course, I always say to people, I just bring information forth. You take what works for you and leave the rest behind. Let's try not to blame or make people wrong. Let's just, take the information that we know is our truth and move forward in our purpose, because that's why we're here. We are a very, very special group of people that are here to take this to the next level. So if you want to check out more of Kevin's information, again, I want to remind you to go to itccs.org. And Kevin, thank you again. We love you. And you have so many people that are out there rooting for you, knowing how tough it is sometimes for you.
Well, thanks to everyone, and to you especially, Alexandra, as always.
You're welcome. You take care, and we will talk to you shortly.
Okay.
Okay, lots of love. Bye.